Hey, welcome back to DannyBTalks. My name is Danny B, aka Daniel Baldwin. Well, that's my real name, whatever you want to refer to me as. We have got a lot to talk about after this weekend's race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, particularly the drama that happened on track. But before we do that, just want to say congratulations to the 22 team of Joey Logano on getting the win in that epic fight with Ross Chastain there towards the end of that race. It was an entertaining finish nonetheless. Kyle Busch looked like he could steal second away. He possibly could have stole the win if those two had kept fighting for long enough after Kyle Busch actually had a tire come off. I'm sure he'll have a suspension for his crew chief for the next 4 races after that incident, but they were still going to go for the win at the end of that. So that was actually, as it turns out, the last race we'll probably see Kyle Busch run of Ben Bayshore, as I'm sure Ben Bayshore will likely stay with Joe Gibbs Racing after Kyle Busch leaves for Richard Childress Racing next year. Let's get into the big topic at hand today. Bubba Wallace versus Kyle Larson. Big incident between those two this weekend. Let's break it down. What happened first? I'm going to refer over here to my notes. I've got my notebook here, and just so I can stay on track with everything that happened. Bubba Wallace was racing alongside Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson then gets into Bubba Wallace as they push it a little bit too hard going out of turn 4. Bubba Wallace ends up making contact into the wall, likely doing some significant damage to the car, but maybe not enough to end his race per se. Then Bubba Wallace's 45 car dives low into Kyle Larson, hitting him in his right rear at full throttle. NBC cameras ended up going back and seeing the throttle indicators that showed that Bubba Wallace was full throttle when this happened, so he had not let off even going down into the 5 car. Makes it look as though there was a clear intent to wreck Kyle Larson in this incident. Now, I want to clarify, he was trying to wreck the 5. I made a mistake. I said something I shouldn't have on my Twitter yesterday. I used the word Bubba Wallace was trying to kill or harm Kyle Larson. I don't think that was necessarily his intent, but it very well could have hurt Kyle Larson. That's not to be ignored in this situation. Bubba then said that his steering was broke. Do you buy that? Because I don't really buy that, folks. I don't think that his steering was necessarily broke. It looked as though he was in full control of the car as it suddenly went quickly down to the left, but it looked as though that was in control of the car. We'll have to wait and see what NASCAR's official research goes into that and find out, what was the steering at when that incident happened. NASCAR will go ahead and go look into that result, I'm sure. But I don't necessarily buy that his steering was broke after hitting the wall. I mean, yeah, it was a hard hit, but I don't think his car was necessarily done after this. Bubba then goes and shoves Kyle Larson afterwards and wants him to kind of fight him back. Kyle Larson wants nothing to do with that. He's saying, no, man, no, stop. I'm not fighting you. That's what Kyle Larson was doing. Bubba increasingly was very angry, and rightfully so. I can see why he's upset in this situation. Kyle Larson did push him into turn 4 coming through there. Maybe Larson should have backed out of it. Maybe Bubba should have backed out of it too. Maybe they both probably get wrong in some way here. But Bubba Wallace took it a lot further by going ahead and wrecking both of them, ending both of their days. Like I said, I don't think that Bubba's day would necessarily have been done after hitting the wall like that. But when he wrecked himself while wrecking Kyle Larson, that ended his day altogether. Then afterwards in his interview, Bubba said, as mentioned, that his steering was broke. And he also said that Cliff Daniels should know better how easy these cars break, because Cliff Daniels said to Kyle Larson on the radio, if that wasn't retaliation, I don't know what was. Bubba kind of saying that Cliff Daniels should know better that these cars break easy, kind of to play it off as, his steering broke. Again, I don't necessarily buy this story from Bubba Wallace in this situation. I know a lot of fans are not in agreement on that. Some people do buy it. A lot of people do not. I'm one of those who says I do not buy that from Bubba Wallace in this situation. He claimed that Kyle Larson made a 3-wide dive bomb. Well, he was 3 wide going down the back straightaway, and then they cleared the 4 of Kevin Harvick, both of them. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call that a 3-wide dive bomb per se, but Kyle Larson did keep it going and ultimately kind of getting themselves both into the wall coming out of turn 4. That necessarily wasn't really the best move on Kyle Larson's behalf, but when he was asked if this was retaliation for Kyle Larson getting him into the wall. He just simply said to Marty Snyder, "Stop fishing." Well, I'm a fisherman by nature. You guys know that. And I know fishing. And I know fishing in the media sense. You know, he's asking a question. He's asking a legit question. He's asking Bubba Wallace, did you retaliate on Kyle Larson? I don't think that was, anything wrong to ask. I don't think Bubba Wallace should have said stop fishing. He's asking you for the answer. Was that retaliation? If it was, if he's man enough to go hit him like that, I think he should also be man enough to say, yes, I was retaliating for what happened on track. I know you don't want to admit to something like that with NASCAR. We saw that happen with William Byron recently. He admitted something that, he basically, not all the way, but he basically did admit, to hitting Denny Hamlin under caution, and that led to a penalty, rightfully so. In this situation, he didn't want to get himself trouble in that, but also it's like, Bubba, it's kind of video evidence tells itself there a little bit. Moving on, Christopher Bell is Toyota ally of Bubba Wallace. He was also taken out in this crash, and this ultimately could have ended his chances for a playoff appearance in the Championship 4. This has put him now where he's below the cutoff line significantly, and who knows what's going to happen at Homestead and Martinsville now at this point. And yeah, he won his way in the last round, but can we guarantee he's going to do it in this round? Bubba Wallace, in a sense, as a Toyota driver, should know better than to try to do anything dumb that's going to mess with his Toyota-aligned drivers' chances to win a championship. Well, ultimately, Christopher Bell was took out in this wreck, and when he was asked about this in the interview, he simply shrugged it off and just said, "Sports." That's not an answer, Bubba. I get it. I get it. You don't want to admit fault here, but the folks at Toyota aren't going to appreciate that kind of, result in what happened here. And I just don't think there was enough, maybe I shouldn't be thinking too much. It's a lot of in the heat moment type of stuff. And in a way I get it, but in a way I'm like, Bubba, you should have known a little bit better there, man. Christopher Bell now could maybe not have a chance to run for a championship. And he ultimately looked like a driver who was capable of possibly contending for the championship. And if this is the way his championship season ends, his bid for a championship ends, that's not going to reflect well from the folks at Toyota. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens on that situation. Likewise, Kyle Larson was also interviewed after the race, or after he came out of the infield care center. And he says that Bubba Wallace's reaction didn't surprise him, and he claimed and acknowledged that he made an aggressive move coming through turn 3. And he also said that Bubba had a reason to be mad, but his race wasn't over until he retaliated. And again, I noted that earlier. I'm with Kyle Larson on this one. I don't think Bubba Wallace's race would have necessarily been done. With this car, yeah, we've seen some, dangerous moments from the car, but we've also seen this car take a lick and still be able to contend and keep going. So I don't think it was necessarily over for Bubba Wallace, but he certainly made it over when he proved his point to Kyle Larson. And when he asked if the retaliation was an acceptable thing, Kyle Larson simply said that with all that's been going on with concussions and other injuries to other drivers such as Cody Ware, he said that it just probably is not the right thing to do, according to Kyle Larson's words. And but he also acknowledged that Kyle himself has been guilty in previous racing incidents of kind of losing his cool and also retaliating. So in a way, he's not too surprised. And he said he was not surprised when Bubba Wallace became physical either. Point blank, the question needs to be asked now. Was Bubba out of line here? Yes. I think the answer is yes. This could have handled a lot better. This could have been handled a lot better by Bubba Wallace. And this incident ultimately could have hurt Kyle Larson. Yes, it did not, but it very well could have. Larson may have been lucky that Christopher Bell was there, because that kind of then changed how that wreck was going to happen. We've seen now, ironically enough, Bubba's teammate and, former driver of the 45 car, Kurt Busch, ultimately had to retire this weekend. Now, I say retire loosely. He's worded it more as he hopes this isn't the end per se. It's not really a goodbye as much as a hopefully see you later. He says, he would intend to hopefully maybe run another race one day if his health, permits him to do so. So, it's unfortunate what's happened with his teammate Kurt Busch, and it's even harder now that this kind of retaliation that could have resulted in injury happens from the 45 car. Also, Kyle Larson's teammate Alex Bowman, he's currently out with concussion symptoms as well from a crash that happened at Texas Motor Speedway. So who knows what could happen with the future of Alex Bowman. Kurt Busch's future is, known at this point. He's going to step away. He's not going to race full-time next year. He might not race at all, ever. We just don't know right now, Kurt Busch. But he is going to step away from full-time Cup Series competition for now. That's all we know right now. Some people came at me and wanted to bring up past examples. Well, you know what? As much as I say those situations shouldn't matter because this should be handled case by case and we're on this case, let's talk about history if you want to talk about history. Because after all, I do talk about NASCAR history on this channel sometimes. Someone asked me, has Alex Bowman never done anything to right rear a driver? Obviously, they're referring to what happened at Charlotte in 2019. So that situation, yeah, Alex Bowman, he did turn Bubba Wallace. And I don't think the excuse of him flipping him off was necessarily a fair excuse for doing that. I think Alex Bowman did lose his cool in that. After the race, though, it kind of... both parties did something stupid. Alex Bowman did something stupid by turning him at the Roval that year. And Bubba Wallace then likewise came up and while he was dealing with heat exhaustion, just poured whatever the liquid was, water, Powerade, whatever it was in his face. I don't think that was very professional. I don't think what Alex Bowman did was very professional. Was it worth a suspension? I don't know really what to say on that one. I don't want to get into that realm, not trying to be biased in that situation, but it probably should have resulted in some kind of penalty because I don't think there was any penalty at all from that moment for Alex Bowman, and maybe there should have looking back on that. A lot of people brought up Noah Gragson at Road America this year. I think this should have been a suspension, at least a one race suspension. A lot of cars from teams who didn't need to be involved in that were involved in that as a result, and ultimately he was only given a 30-point penalty and a $35,000 fine. The $35,000 fine, I'm sure, was worked out. Noah's probably got plenty of income to handle that, no problem. The team probably takes care of that. But a 30-point penalty, think of it like this. Noah Gragson ended up go finish 8th at that race at Road America. You take away the 30 points, that's essentially most of the points he gained in that race altogether. So it's like, essentially they parked him. That's basically how that works out. He just didn't get the points. The next week at Atlanta, he goes on to finish 6th. So kind of works itself out. It works itself back out. Noah had already won in the season, so he's already secured for playoffs. They didn't take any kind of playoff eligibility for him. They didn't make him sit a race out. I think that should have been worth a one race suspension. I don't think he should have raced in that next race at Atlanta after that, because that was a very aggressive move that, could have got someone hurt at Road America. I will not disagree with anyone who says that Noah Gragson should have had a suspension after that race, because it was a very bad moment on the track. Next up, people brought up Kenseth versus Logano in 2015. Now, Kenseth is seen today as a hero by most fans, arguably because Logano has a lot of haters as well as his fans. And, in that same race, it's kind of ironic. There was another situation people might not talk about as much. Danica Patrick actually went after and attempted to wreck David Gilliland. She actually ended up damaging her car more than she did David Gilliland. This was retaliation after an earlier incident in that race between those two drivers. And Danica Patrick was ultimately fined $50,000 and docked 25 points after that. In a way, I think that was a fair penalty there. This was two drivers who were not championship contenders at all. Danica Patrick's team actually ended up coming out worse in that race because she was the one with more damage in her race car. And I think $50,000 fine and 25 points was satisfactory in that one. But then Joey Logano was then wrecked while in the lead by Matt Kenseth, who'd already been taken out in a crash in that race. And this was in retaliation for, things that had led up in the previous weeks to come out to that race. Whether you liked it or not, NASCAR, in their eyes, saw this as a problem because you had a driver who manipulated a driver's chance to, contend for the championship. And it's also a move that, while it wasn't at the speeds we saw at Las Vegas Motor Speedway this weekend, it is something that, could have hurt both drivers, theoretically. So, we can only go off of that note. Again, you see the patch that's on my shirt here. I'm a Tennessee Vols fan. You know that we just beat Alabama. You know our fans rushed the field for that one. Well, SEC still saw that as a problem, and they fined the University of Tennessee $100,000. So just like this, similar situations, they see it as a problem. NASCAR saw it as a problem. They ultimately parked Matt Kenseth for the rest of that race, and they suspended him for 2 races. That was the decision made. And looking back on it, all things considered, whether you like Matt Kenseth or you don't like him from that moment, I think that was a fair response on NASCAR's behalf. Then people brought up the Jeff Gordon, Clint Bowyer thing that happened at Phoenix. Very similar. Jeff Gordon had already been damaged. He wrecked and ruined Clint Bowyer's race. Well, Jeff Gordon avoided a suspension from this one, and maybe he should have had one looking back. He was fined $100,000 and he was docked 25 points from that incident that happened back at Phoenix in 2012. And ultimately, that kind of ruined Clint Bowyer's bid to win a championship that season. So, yeah, I think Jeff Gordon, looking back on that, maybe got off a lot easier than he should have. Then the other one that was brought up a lot was Kyle Busch and Ron Hornaday at Texas in 2011. Now, this one, I went back and rewatched this. The commentators on the Speed Network at that time, they really got under Kyle Busch on this one. They were immediately saying he should be parked for this race and maybe for the rest of the season. And the decision was made after that moment, which was very dangerous, could have hurt Ron Hornaday, ruined his race and his bid for the championship going through that season, and because he was a contender for it that season. And Kyle Busch was ultimately parked that race, and he was parked for the nationwide race and the cup race that weekend. They had to get a substitute driver. And then he was fined $50,000 and placed on probation for the rest of the season. So they only made him sit out one race weekend, the rest of that weekend, and the Texas Motor Speedway. And that weekend was all he had to really sit out. So they did suspend him for 2 races if you want to look at it from the Xfinity Series and the Cup race. Some people today argue that was still kind of a lighter sentence for Kyle Busch in that one. Now, in all these circumstances, most people, I would say, came out better after that one, after the penalty. We didn't, obviously, with Kyle Busch being under probation the rest of the season, we didn't see anything that made him break that probation. Even Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano ultimately joke about that moment today. Even Kenseth was doing commentary earlier this season, and he called up Joey Logano, so they can kind of laugh it off today. But that's them. How about right now, Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace? The question remains: should Bubba Wallace be suspended following this incident? Now, I'm a fan who also likes to talk about my thoughts about NASCAR racing on YouTube and Twitter. So take my words with a grain of salt, by all means. But I'm here to give my thoughts on the race. And my thoughts are that I do think Bubba Wallace should have a suspension of at least one race and possibly fine him $50,000 and dock 30 points from him and the team. I think that is the penalty I would do in this situation, because ultimately this was a moment that could have hurt Kyle Larson. Both drivers were not competing for the championship. Kyle Larson has been eliminated from the playoffs, but that could have hurt his fellow competitor. And no matter what their feelings are when they're on the track, I get it. Racing's an aggressive sport. You're gonna get mad. But there's a time and place to handle that, and 170 miles per hour is not the time for Bubba Wallace to lose his cool like that. And I think this is where NASCAR needs to come in and set a new standard. Because I feel like a lot of drivers today feel like just pay a fine, take the point to stock. That's not going to scare them at this point. If they're not contending for a championship, why are they worried about the points now? As long as they're in the top 35 and they got enough to worry about for Daytona next year, I wouldn't be too worried. But now, this is the moment that NASCAR needs to step in and say, hey boys, we get it. This sport is built on rivalries. There's a lot of them for the years. But you do need to have a little bit more class when you're going to race in the NASCAR Cup Series. This goes for all drivers. It doesn't matter that it's Bubba Wallace. I get there's going to be people that don't like Bubba Wallace for reasons outside of the racetrack. I am not one of those. I personally like Bubba Wallace. But this is the first race where I was truly mad at him for the way he handled himself on the racetrack. So, yeah, I think he should be suspended for at least one race, maybe more. But that is on NASCAR to decide. They will surely do an investigation on this, and we'll find out later this week what their ruling is on this. That's just how I feel about it as a lifelong fan of NASCAR. We look back at some of the history. We look back at what happened. That is my thoughts on whether or not Bubba Wallace should be suspended. Let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think. Leave your thoughts down there. And be sure to like the video and subscribe to DannyBTalks if you are new to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. Bye, guys. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video from DannyBTalks. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on the video, and if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. You might like all the other videos here on this YouTube channel. I talk about all things NASCAR, past, present, and future. Until next time, have a great day. Bye guys.